Attorney Camora, let's give him a helicopter. I don't think he'll do that in one day. So it really raises a question. How did SDO Fajardo certify and say that he personally disbursed this? It looks like from north to south, tip to tip po ng Pilipinas. By Batanes pa rin po. So these are just some of the questions that we have. This is not just for the handling of funds in general. Even for
Yes,
payments of
Mr.
rewards and information, it goes the same way.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
The SDO gives payment directly to the recipient, and the recipient is supposed to give the AR or any DEPs that are in relation to that. Ms. Camora, Attorney Camora, so these acknowledgement receipts were submitted by the OVP and the DepEd to COA. This is the proof, this is the documentary evidence of payment that is required by the circular. And now we have that understanding that you've confirmed now that the SDO personally handles the same. So they handle the funds and they handle personally the DEPs.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
So if there's any doubt to the confidential funds, if there is any doubt at all to the DEPs, any doubts to the ARs, which have been hammered down in the last hearing and now in this hearing, this all points down to the SDO. This is their personal responsibility under the joint circular.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
So, for example, one of the things that we pointed out last time in relation to the dates, if there is any problem with the date of the AR, it should have passed to the SDO.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Because unlike, for example, in our usual po natin, Attorney Camora, let's say, in a usual transaction, pumunta ka sa mall, bumili ka ng pagkain, magbibigay ng resibo, you wouldn't pay a second thought on that OR because usually you don't have to liquidate it anywhere, just a piece of paper. But as an SDO in which you have a personal responsibility, nakataya pera mo pa rin kasi nakaband ka po to the treasury.
Yes, Mr.
So
Chair.
you would have to check and make sure that all of the ARs are accurate,
Yes, Mr. Chair.
including the date.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Since one of the responsibilities under the joint circular is to disburse the CF and IF in accordance with the provisions of the circular.
Yes. So in the circular, it requires an acknowledgement receipt, and an acknowledgement receipt would require the date. So the date having been filled in for the AR and received by the SDO has the responsibility to make sure that it is correct.
Yes, Mr. Chair, although the requirement is documentary evidence.
Documentary
of
evidence.
payment.
So I'm sorry, but yes, as the AR as the DEP
Yes,
would
Mr.
be
Chair.
required to have gone under scrutiny of the SDO. So if we had 158 ARs which have a supposed typographical error, shouldn't the SDO have caught on since they personally gave the money and received the receipt? He would check the receipt. Kung tama yung pangalan, may signature, tama yung purpose, and the date. So the 158 times na mali yung date, supposedly 158 times na dumaan po ito sa SDO.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So with that, we'd like to ask the COA. I know we've asked this before already, but we're looking into the responsibility of the COA. You've already mentioned many times that the ICFA would only be concerned with the submission of the DEPs and that you wouldn't look no further because generally parang ministerial na lang to a point. But should it have raised some red flags po? Especially now in hindsight, yung 158 with typographical errors ng dates.
Because of our hearings here, we're kind of looking into this, that we should be a little stricter on our audit from now on. So
We understand po, no, you mentioned before that one of the limitations of your office is manpower. And I think
Yes,
one
Mr.
thing that the
Chair.
committee will be working on in aid of legislation is to strengthen po the COA that you would have the proper manpower support to make sure that this does not happen again. I think
Yes.
that's one thing, personally, this representation would like to push forward for the consideration of the committee. But with that said, so I hope now the ICFA would take into special consideration not only the impossibility of typographical errors, the frequency of it occurring, the time span in which it happens. And of course now, as mentioned by Congressman Adjong, we've seen earlier that there are problems even to the multiple names with different signatures. This should have raised a red flag. And of course, the bogus names that were raised by Congressman Acop, such as Mary Grace Piatos. So these are things that I hope that the ICFA would be more stringent with. But there's one more matter, aside from that, which we have brought up from the previous hearing, that I hope that you could consider. Upon studying po yung DEPs natin, and we already know that there's a question about the time span in which that it was dispersed. Alam natin, questionable yung 11 days, na 5 days pa nga po ay holiday, dispersed po ito lahat. But one more thing we have to consider, now that you have affirmed to us, now that we understand it better, na yung SDO is personally in charge of disbursing the funds, we collated po yung ating mga DEPs. And we've seen po, for example, this is, I think, the DepEd. So this would be by Mr. Fajardo. For the, I believe this is the first quarter of 2023, submitted on the 31st of March, there were disbursements every day po, no? Since the release of the cash. And that disbursements, they would not go less than 10 times a day po. If you could see po in the chart, this is what we've seen. You would notice that the ARs, it would say the address or location. This is one thing particularly with the DepEd. Aside from the name, the signature, and the date, meron pong locations. So, on February 21, 2023, or the very next day after the SDO encashed the 37.5 million in checks, lumabas po sa acknowledgement receipts that SDO Fajarda made 7 disbursements already. This is the day after, in 7 different locations. And the locations are Malolos, Davao, San Francisco, Agusan del Sur, Makati City, Negros Oriental, Negros Occidental, and Davao City. So the very next day, after, I would assume, the check was issued, it was encashed in Land Bank under the Shaw branch. Tama po ba for DepEd? Or
DepEd branch.
The DepEd branch. So the DepEd branch, that is in what city po here in NCR?
Pasig, sir.
In Pasig po na encash, and immediately the next day, he traveled to these 7 places and have these 7 ARs. Did this not raise a red flag of the impossibility of this occurring?
Well, it does, sir. Although during our review, somehow we just accepted the acknowledgement receipt.
For reasons, Attorney Camara. In addition to this, if you go to the day of the first quarter that had the most disbursements, which is March 15, 2023, SDO Fajarda supposedly made 26 disbursements in the following locations: Davao del Sur, Surigao del Sur, Oriental Mindoro, Laguna, Zamboanga del Sur, Cebu, Ifugao, Antique, Batanes, Pampanga, Legazpi, Lanao del Norte, Batangas, Tarlac, Metro Manila, Samar, Davao de Oro, Agusan del Norte, Davao del Sur, Davao de Oro, Laguna, Cavite, Surigao del Norte. Attorney Camora, let's give him a helicopter. I don't think he'll do that in one day. So it really raises a question. How did SDO Fajardo certify and say that he personally disbursed this? Buti na lang po yung DepEd ARs have location. So it really shows us kung saan po sila. Unlike the DepEd ARs, yung OVP po wala. Yung OVP would only have the name, the purpose, the name, the signature, and the date. That's it. And the amount. Pero here we could see in DepEd, it seems to be really impossibility. So you could see the theme, not really the theme po, no, but what we're driving at here. Earlier, according to Congresswoman Garin, and I understand her frustration, there is the physical impossibility of the delivery and encashment of the cash. The questions regarding that, surrounding where it was brought. And then now, even the physical impossibility of the disbursement. Yun naman po yung tanong dito. If truly SDO certifies that he or she is the only person and has personal knowledge of disbursement, has personal knowledge, has gone through the DEPs, how do we explain this? It looks like from north to south, tip to tip po ng Pilipinas. By Batanes pa rin po. So these are just some of the questions that we have. And if we look at the chart earlier, it happens multiple times. For February 25, there were 21 disbursements across 18 different localities. February 27, 21 disbursements across 18 localities. March 3, and the list goes on. And if you notice the chart, every day po yun. Every day po may disbursement. So it really raises the question po, no?
Yes, Mr.
About
Chair.
the legal, the veracity of the certification. We're now seeing the consequences of our current format that we have, that a simple signature which the COA just blindly, not to fault you, again, we understand the reasons that you have, that you lack manpower and all that. But napakahirap po to because we're talking about the most difficult to account for, confidential intelligence funds po, no? So, if I may continue, Attorney Camora, and again, I understand frustration. I wanted to ask this to the SDO personally. I think they would have been able to answer. But on the light side na lang po, to make the most of the information that we have, at least on the side of the COA, that you'd understand the frustration of this committee and that you'd understand po where we'd want to proceed with this. It goes the same with the OVP. If I may continue, Mr. Chair, the pattern of the OVP is that even if it does not have the locality or the address, the disbursements are really dubious and curious because it really makes use of these disbursements in a way that you would find hard to believe. Just the number of disbursements given in the number of days, it really raises some questions po, no? Like for example, on December 23 of December, 23rd of December of 2022, this is close as in relation to what Congressman Acop mentioned. There were a lot of holidays in those 11 days. And in fact, Noche Buena would have been the number one thing that people would be preparing for. But on the eve of Christmas, or the day before, when you would be preparing for the eve of Christmas, on December 23, at least 103 individuals received a total amount of 15 million pesos. I mean, just 15 million pesos for 103 individuals. If truly the SDO is certifying that personally I think this is SDO Acosta, she disbursed this, it really raises the question kung the possibility po, no, of how they did this. So, and this would include a bunch of things. No? It's very much payment of reward, payment of information, medicine, the safe houses were also included there. Given the various clusterings, if you would call it that, parang it leads to the, I would not say impossibility, the improbability of the AR submitted. So I think we really need a strict scrutiny po, no, of the DEPs that are being submitted. I'd
Yes,
just like to
Mr.
point out that based on this study, the days where the OVP gave confidential funds, over 100 recipients, all happened in 2022. And this is the time that had the 11-day period. So you could see na, I don't know if it's intentional, pero minadali po talaga. There was really quick disbursement. And in line with that, just one last question, Attorney Camora, and which was brought up by Congressman Acop. He was driving the point with Attorney Sanchez that you could obligate the confidential funds. If you don't consume, for example, because this is cash advance system, you advanced 125 for December of 2022, and you've only consumed, for example, 100 million. Does that mean mawawala na po yung 25 million, or does it carry on to the next quarters? Sorry, let's not do 2022 kasi last month na yun. Let's say for yung GAA provided na CIF. If in the first quarter of 125 million, na consume lang po is or what's justified is 100 million, what is the effect for the second quarter? Can they disburse 150 million, or are they limited still to the quarterly limit of 125?
Mr. Chair, the cash advances for the whole year. So as long as the cash advances are within the year and the last cash advance was liquidated, they could cash advance again for the next like quarter or the next, yes, quarter, since most of them do it quarterly.
So for example, on the 31st of March, I've consumed 100 and I justify with the liquidation report of 100 million. I still need to justify the 25 left, even beyond March 31. That would be allowed for the first quarter?
Can you repeat po?
Sorry. So yung first quarter po, meron tayong cash advance of
Yes,
125
Mr. Chair.
million. Ang nakonsumo lang po ng opisina ay 100 million lamang. May 25 million po na balance. Does that mean I can still justify the 25 million after March 31?
No, Mr. Chair. If it has been cash advanced for that period and the amount that was unutilized should be returned by the SDO.
It should be returned to the SDO.
Yes,
Yung
Mr.
sinasabi
Chair.
po ni
Since
Congressman
yung liquidation
Acop,
po is yung buong amount po dapat.
but it could be obligated in that time. It doesn't have to be dispersed. You could obligate for the 25 million pa hindi naman return. I believe that was the point that Congressman Acop was making.
Pwede naman po
Pwede.
yata. As long as it is still within the year of the it's still within the year, so yung cash advance is still for the year.
Thank you, Attorney Comoro. So yun lang po, just to manifest, it really drives the point that it seems to be, there are questions po with the timing and the accompanying DEPs, and I'm sure that we're still going to go back to this. There were other questions, but unfortunately, wala po yung ating SDO, so I'll have to hold on to that. Mr. Chair, with that, I'd yield to other interpellators. Maraming salamat po.